provided a melting pot of ideas and creativity, unfettered depending on where you live, clearly a platform for the exchange of high-end concepts, stories, philosophies, culture, information, jokes, outright bullshit and contrived puns.
At its inception, there was little money to be made from podcasting. It grew largely on the foundation of having a desire to share a story, or just to connect with others through conversation. And a decade later, we are amidst a podcast boom. With over 144 million listeners in the US, the audio narrative has generated an endless supply of interesting and real conversation, or as Andy put it, a melting pot of ideas and creativity. I see podcasts as a transformation in journalism, one that feels intrinsically beneficial. The fundamental difference between podcasts and traditional print and broadcast media is that the latter has always struggled in its ability to feel sincere. Podcasts, however, are able to provide more information, a greater depth of discussion, and a much greater expression of people's humanity than anything that has existed before them.
Newspapers in Canada went cap in hand to the federal government for subsidies about 6 months ago because they're dying so fast. And so some of it is they're being supplanted by technology. That's a huge part of it. But as they are supplanted, they get more desperate. They publish more polarizing stories. That works in the short term to garner more views, but it alienates people from the brand and speeds their demise.
Podcasting is that new technology. Its format is simply superior to its predecessors. The long-form and unedited approach is a refreshing change from the clickbait journalism and soundbite style of entertainment that we have grown so accustomed to.
Hey, hit that applause sign again!
It has, I believe, completely revived the creative potential of a dying media landscape. Like most technology these days, podcasts are inherently mobile. Their on-demand access allows people to seek out a podcast and listen at a time that suits them best. And there's no shortage of podcast creators out there to listen to, however niche or complex. As a result, instead of flicking through channels or quickly scanning through a specious article, people are exploring the podcasting landscape. They are committed, engaged, and most importantly, they feel like they're part of the conversation. This is especially true for listeners of the Joe Rogan experience.
Welcome back, and I can't wait to see you fight for the title.
What's up, Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Joe's viewership continues to grow, and I think one of the components to his success derives from his acute awareness of the ever-changing media landscape. Take a look at this, for instance.
The internet itself is a fascinating experiment. You know, the whole idea of connectivity, of like complete connectivity to everybody all over the world all at once. In the past, like, the only way audiences got to know you is if they saw you on The Tonight Show, or, you know, you got interviewed on someone and you got to speak your opinions about some things, but it's always condensed and it's always real weird. But to be on the internet, people can really get to know you.
It seems Joe saw the revolutionary potential that came with independent long-form content. Podcasts escape the limitations that traditional media faces. They are not constrained by time, nor are they over-directed by executives and producers that sit above them. And ultimately, what this allows podcasts to achieve is authenticity. Here's an example. When UFC fighter Donald Cerrone went on the podcast, he told Joe about his near-death cave diving experience. Now, it took him around 15 minutes to tell his story, and in that time, Joe didn't interrupt him once because, well, he didn't need to, and we didn't need him to. This freedom is simply not feasible in TV or traditional interviews. Podcasts, however, are unsullied. It's a style that prizes authenticity over authority. Or as Harvard law professor Lawrence Lessig said so perfectly, it is healthy eating for a brainscape that now gorges on fast food.
And it's a way for people to broadcast entertainment, a way for anybody to broadcast something entertaining to the whole world and bypass this whole bullshit system of networks and radio stations. And who the fuck are these people that are running this stuff? They're people that are business-minded people that are telling artists and creative people what they can and can't do.
Joe is a great conversationalist, but what makes him a great conversationalist is his curiosity. In a way, I see Joe as the voice of his listeners, where instead of nodding in agreement to everything his guests say, he will embrace what he doesn't know. He will ask for further explanation just as easily as he will challenge the views of something he disagrees with. Joe's podcast is prevailing because he's created a powerful community of like-minded people, classifiable not exclusively by interests, but by genuine curiosity of the world and its people. Jad Abumrad, host of Radiolab, had a great take on the matter. He stated that in a sense, he's painting something, but he's not holding the paintbrush. You are. So it's a deep act of co-authorship, and in that is some potential for empathy. And this idea of sharing the paintbrush echoes in unison with Joe.
There's ultimate power that comes with being the person who has the pen.
Podcasting effectively is an act of sharing the pen between host, guest and listener, giving insight into topics in an engaging and reflective way that does no more than stimulate public discourse with fair and honest representation. And it's that intimate and real connection between host and listener that gives podcasts unmatchable value. I think ultimately people are tired of being lied to. This podcast explosion is proof of our craving to understand one another and learn what we didn't know yesterday. They are a step in the right direction towards our collective desire for authenticity in a media landscape previously devoid of such. Podcasting is perhaps the antidote to the flaws of the present.